There is a moment that is approaching in your life, and I don't think you are completely prepared for it. Not because you are weak, not because you failed when it came to love, but because the version of yourself that learned how to survive relationships may not know what to do when something genuine finally enters your life. And I need you to pay close attention to this part. When it happens, it probably won't feel the way you imagine it will. It won't come with fireworks, dramatic signs, or some perfect movie-like certainty. It will be much quieter than that, almost confusing, like something deep inside you begins to relax while another part of you becomes tense at the exact same time. And if you have ever experienced that strange feeling, that invisible pull where your heart seems to recognize something before your mind can understand it, then stay with me. Maybe even subscribe. Not because of me, but because you don't want to lose this message later. Because what we are about to explore has a way of disappearing from your awareness exactly when you need to remember it the most. You have probably spent years believing that you understand attraction. You've noticed patterns. You've learned what works and what doesn't. Maybe you discovered how to hold yourself back just enough, how to say the right words, how to avoid becoming emotionally invested too quickly. And from the outside, it may look like confidence or control, but underneath that control is something else. Protection, because somewhere along your journey, you realize that deeply wanting someone comes with a risk, and you have paid that price before, maybe more than once. So now you don't simply experience attraction, you analyze it, you study it, you measure it, you try to manage it. And that is exactly why what is coming may shake you a little. Because this time it won't fit inside the emotional system you have created to protect yourself. She is going to be younger, not only because of her age, but because of the way she approaches connection. There is a certain openness in her, a natural way of experiencing emotions that does not carry the same level of calculation you may have become used to. And at first you might misunderstand it. You might think it is innocence. You might think it is simply excitement. You might even believe it is temporary, but it is not that simple, because what she is bringing into your life is not something you can predict, control, or mentally solve. It is something you feel before you even decide what it means. And that is where things begin to feel uncomfortable, because one side of you will want to move closer. But another side, the part of you that remembers what happened the last time you allowed yourself to feel deeply, will quietly begin pulling you backward. It will tell you to slow down, to stay logical, to not get too emotionally involved. And from the outside, you will probably appear calm and composed, but internally, there will be a quiet conflict growing. Almost like something important is trying to reach you, and you are unsure whether you should open the door. What will truly surprise you is not her. It is the way you begin seeing yourself through her eyes. She will not approach you the way you are familiar with. There will be no performance, no hidden tests, no emotional games designed to create power, no carefully calculated distance meant to make you chase harder. She will simply be there, present, honest, and in a way that feels almost disarming. At first, you may not trust it, because you have learned that when something feels easy, there is usually a reason to be cautious. You have learned that when someone gives too much too quickly, sometimes it disappears just as fast. So your instinct will be to search for problems. You will look for the cracks. You will pay attention to what she says, how often she reaches out, whether her energy changes, whether there is something hidden beneath the surface. You will try to organize her behavior into something predictable, something that feels safe. But she may not fit into that pattern, and that is where things start becoming difficult, because she is not responding to the version of you that performs. She is responding to the parts of yourself you usually keep hidden, the quieter parts, the parts that do not try to impress, the parts that do not attempt to control every outcome, the parts you may not even fully reveal to yourself. And when she sees those parts of you and does not walk away, something inside you begins to change, because that creates a kind of emotional tension you are not used to experiencing. Strange, isn't it? You may have spent years trying to become someone worthy of being chosen, building yourself into someone dependable, someone strong, someone stable, someone who always has everything together. But when someone connects with you without requiring all that effort, it does not only feel good, it feels exposing, because suddenly there is nothing left to hide behind, no strategies, no emotional distance, no carefully designed version of yourself, just you, actually being seen. And sometimes that can feel more vulnerable than rejection ever did, because rejection is clear. It gives you something to fight against, something to understand, something to move away from. But this is different. This feels softer. And because it is softer, it can be harder to protect yourself from. You may notice yourself hesitating in small ways, taking longer to respond, holding back words you almost wanted to say, keeping conversations slightly more casual than they naturally could become, not because you don't care, not because you are uninterested, but because something deeper is beginning to move inside you, and you are not sure whether you can trust it yet. And underneath all of this, a question begins forming, a question you may not say out loud. Why does this feel different? Not necessarily better, not necessarily worse. Just different in a way that does not match anything you have experienced before. And for someone like you, unfamiliar has rarely felt completely safe. There is something else you are going to start noticing, and it may catch you off guard. She will not love you in the same way you have been loved before. Not in that careful, controlled, almost negotiated way where everything feels like an invisible exchange. I give this much, you give that much. Let's keep things balanced. Let's not show too much too soon. No, her way of connecting will feel different, less structured, less guarded, and that is exactly why it may feel confusing in the beginning. Because you have become familiar with relationships having a certain rhythm, a certain pace, a certain pattern you can recognize. You know when to move closer. You know when to create distance. You know when something feels like too much. You know when to protect yourself. But she does not follow those invisible emotional rules you have spent years learning. She may say something honest before you expect her to. She may show excitement without first checking whether you feel the same way. She may express care openly without trying to hide how much you matter. And instead of immediately feeling comfortable, you might feel a little uncertain, not because she is doing something wrong, but because her openness removes the emotional distance you have depended on for so long, and that distance was never just space between you and another person. It was a form of safety. Control has always been connected to feeling secure. When you can predict something, you can prepare for it. When you can prepare for it, you feel protected. But when someone suddenly shortens that distance and invites you into something more genuine, it does not only bring you closer to them, it brings you closer to parts of yourself that you have carefully managed for years. And that can feel overwhelming in a quiet way. There is usually a moment around this point that many people miss. It is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It is subtle. You may be talking with her one evening, or maybe you are simply thinking about her later when you are alone. And suddenly, you notice something different. You are not trying to impress her. You are not planning your next response. You are not analyzing every word before you say it. You are simply there, present. And that moment matters, because being fully present means you are no longer protected by strategy. You are no longer hiding behind preparation. You are allowing yourself to experience whatever this connection becomes. And here is something most people do not expect. That kind of connection does not immediately feel powerful. At first, it can feel uncertain, almost like losing your balance for a second. Because when you stop controlling the outcome, you have to actually experience the emotion as it unfolds. No guarantees, no perfect plan, no emotional armor, just the reality of the moment. Part of you will probably want to define it quickly. Is this real? Is this happening too fast? Will this actually last? But those questions are not really about her. They are about your desire to bring this back into something familiar, something you can categorize, something you can understand, something you can control. But this connection may refuse to fit neatly into those old categories, because what she offers is not built from the same emotional experiences that shaped your defenses. It is not created from the same disappointments. It is not carrying the same history. And being on the receiving end of that can reveal something important. It can show you how much of your own way of loving has been influenced by holding yourself back. And that realization may not feel comfortable, but it can be deeply honest. You may not recognize the change immediately. It will not arrive like a major life event. It will not feel like one single moment where everything suddenly transforms. Instead, it will appear in small ways. The way you sleep, the way you check your phone, the way your thoughts naturally return to her without you forcing them. And if you are honest with yourself, you may try to minimize it at first. She is just someone interesting. Nothing serious. I have felt this before. But somewhere deeper, you already know there is something different. Because your emotions often recognize change before your logic accepts it. There is a particular kind of silence that appears when someone begins to matter. You could be doing something completely ordinary, working, driving through traffic, having a normal conversation, doing something that does not require much emotional energy. And suddenly she appears in your thoughts, not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly present. And what is interesting is not simply that you think about her. It is that you do not immediately push the thought away. That is the part that surprises you, because you have become skilled at creating emotional separation. You can care about someone while still maintaining distance. You can think about someone while keeping your emotions controlled. You can feel something while still keeping yourself protected. But this time, that separation may not happen so easily, and that lack of distance begins to feel like vulnerability. Maybe one day she says something simple, something like, "I missed talking to you." And instead of casually ignoring it or moving past it like you normally might, you pause, just for a moment. And inside that pause, something shifts, because you realize you are not only receiving attention, you are receiving emotional meaning, something sincere, something that does not come with instructions. There is no script telling you the perfect response, no safe emotional distance built into the moment. Just honesty sitting between two people. And this is exactly where your mind begins doing what it has always done whenever something feels too open. It starts searching, looking for inconsistency, looking for warning signs, looking for reasons not to get too close. Because if you can find a reason to doubt it, you can stay where you are comfortable, in familiar territory, the place where you never have to risk being deeply affected. But she may not give you obvious reasons to question her. In fact, she may feel steady, not perfect, not some unrealistic fantasy, just emotionally available in a way you are not used to. And that creates a strange inner conflict, because one part of you begins to relax, while another part does not know what to do without tension. You may even notice yourself creating distance where distance is unnecessary, waiting a little longer before replying, becoming slightly quieter, testing whether she notices your absence. Not because you want to hurt her, not because you are playing a game, but because it is a habit created from moments in the past when closeness did not always feel secure. And if she responds with patience instead of chasing you, that may make everything even more confusing, because there is no drama to solve, no emotional chaos to analyze, no instability to manage, only consistency. And when someone is not used to consistency, it can feel almost unreal at first. You may never say this out loud, but part of you may start wondering, if I stop managing this, what happens? And beneath that question is something much deeper. It is not really fear of her. It is fear of what happens when you stop protecting yourself inside a connection that does not require protection.